check out financestheotherfword.com for FOFW swag and merch.
As fantastic a CFP as Mel O is, and as wonderful an attorney as I am, please do note that anything said in our show are our opinions alone and are not meant to be taken as financial or legal advice.
Welcome to Finances, the Other F Word, a Gen Xer podcast for musicians and music lovers, where we discuss money and music without all the pretentious bullshit. Here are your hosts, Zoe Terry, attorney at large, and Mel O, certified financial planner and author of Finances, the Other F Word. Listener discretion is advised.
So for those of you who have listened to my show, which everybody I see in chat currently has listened to my show before, obviously, and I talk about topics that I want to understand. And when I did the Defunding the Police episode for Finances, the Other F Word, actually the Defunding the Police series, it was bad marketing. Defunding the police sounds horrible. It sounds like it's a horrible name. Nobody would want to do that. But when you look at what they're talking about and when you break down the numbers in the budgets for the police department, which I did, and for the cities, which I did in that series of episodes on Finances, the Other F Word, you find that there's a lot of arguments in the defunding the police movement that makes sense, but it is a victim of bad marketing because defunding the police is an awful fucking name. And people who are angry at the police will latch on to defunding the police out of anger instead of exploring the financial topic behind it. And I go into a lot of detail, and at some point I'll pick that up again here, if you guys can stand it. I see the dragon popped in. We are talking about income redistribution. Dragon, I will be addressing UBI on Friday because there's so much here. So real quickly, I know you guys know who I am, but some people might not. My name is Mel O. I'm a certified financial planner, licensed financial advisor. My investment firm is Hot Moon Financial. My book is Finances, the Other F Word, Another F Word to Love. My podcast is Finances, the Other F Word. And on my show, all my shows, mostly, I dive into topics and explore them from a number standpoint. Now, let me be very fair with everyone. What's going on, DL? Let me be very fair with everyone. I am moderate leaning left. Okay, so let me put that out there because as I'm talking, I'm going to be reeling in my language because I was blown away by the numbers, you guys, and I'm like, fuck, and I don't want to get partisan by any means, and I do think that we need more fiscal responsibility in the government, which the Republicans are very big on, and I do think we need a little bit more compassion for people that are in need, which Democrats kind of hang their hat on that. But let's just talk about income distribution. I'm going to give you guys in this episode, it'll probably be an hour. It might be a little over an hour, but the juiciest shit is at the end of the show. Not because I did that on purpose, but because I put a scenario together with numbers so you can see if you feel that there is a legitimate case for income redistribution. So if you have to jump off or you can't hear the whole show, please listen to the show on replay because all of the good shit is going to be at the end. And so on this episode, I'm going to talk about what income redistribution is. I'm going to give you a hypothetical scenario that I did not find on Google. I literally sat here in my brain and started calculating and crunching numbers to find out if income redistribution in any format would ever be viable and or make sense. Friday, I will go over what would that look like if there was income redistribution. What would be the really bad stuff numbers-wise, and what would be the really good stuff numbers-wise. And then I'm going to give you statistics of global poverty, global earnings, all that kind of stuff. So income redistribution refers to how wealth and income are divided amongst individuals in a society, okay? So basically, we know here in America, as far as globally, we are a very rich country. And we know in America that as far as the 1% and the 99%, there is a ginormous divide between the 1% and the 99%, but not as much as it used to be in the days of Rockefeller. But still, pretty substantial. And if you look at charts, it's widening. The gap is widening. So what's happening is that we are the 1% is pulling away from the 99% in a very big way. Will it ever hit the same measures as it did during the Titans, the Carnegies, and the Rockefellers? I don't know. I hope not, because that was a pretty shitty situation. So let's talk real quickly about the pros of income redistribution. So we're going to talk about the pros. Then we're going to play a song. Then we're going to talk about the cons. And then we're going to play a song. And then we're going to really start exploring this topic. Now, people who are advocates for income redistribution, and what I will tell you by the time we get to the end of this, income redistribution is not what you think it is. It's not what you think it is. So for those of you who are just joining me, I have a scenario at the end of the show that's going to be fucking amazing. So if you cannot listen to my whole show today, please at least listen to the replay and fast forward to the end, because it's very important. So income redistribution, horrible title, not what you think it is at all. So advocates for income redistribution are saying that obviously it is going to reduce poverty. Now, and generally, the estimated poverty level in the United States would be anyone who's making less than, $15,000 a year. So typically, the average person in the United States who lives under the poverty level is making $12,800-ish a year. Okay? So this could be various different reasons, various different locations. So a lot of these numbers I'm giving you, these are averages, okay? So hang with me, because I do my best to put everything in context and show you each of the sides of it. So if you were to have income redistribution, what would of course happen is that you would have a reduction of poverty, right? Because the assumption would be that people who are making $12,000, even if they got $3,000 extra a year, that technically would put them over the poverty level in the United States, all right, to close the gap. And there's a lot of different ways that we can address this, and there's a lot of different ways we can dice it. And at the very end, I give you context, but you guys have to understand that I'm not a research facility. I can't account for everything. So just follow me, all right? Now, advocates say that it provides a safety net. And so what they're saying is that it provides an additional safety net besides Medicaid, which is welfare, and Medicare, which is if you are over 65, that is the health insurance for retirees, and Social Security. Now, those are all entitlement programs. Now, I've talked on my show a gazillion times that entitlement programs make up 2/3 of the budget in the United States. Now, Social Security and Medicare are entitlement programs. People think welfare is an entitlement program only. No, when we talk about when we talk about entitlement, we're talking about all three of those programs. So if you believe that you should get Social Security when you're older, then you believe an entitlement program. That's just what it is. It's an entitlement program. And I've discussed about our budget in detail, about how 2/3 of the budget is entitlement programs, and 1/3 of the budget, 50% of that's automatically allocated typically to the military. So the debt ceiling debate and all that shit was bullshit, because they're arguing over 50% of 1/3 of the budget, right? They're posturing. So it would help reduce poverty, and it would provide a safety net, and Medicaid is welfare, right? And then there's like 80 different programs, and I have numbers for you for the fiscal year ending in 2022 of all of the numbers. And there's tons of different type of welfare, you guys, right? There could be like family assistant, there's a SNAP program, there's just all kinds of different ones. But I'm just kind of just taking welfare and just kind of wrapping it all up because it's easier. One of the other proponents that the positive things that people say could come out of income redistribution was that it enhances social mobility and equal opportunities. So by reducing income inequality, income redistribution can improve your social mobility. So social mobility is your ability to move up the social ladder. So for you to come from poverty and come out of poverty. So Oprah did that. Dolly Parton did that, right? Of course, they went from abject poverty all the way to the very tippy top, right? But anywhere in between, if you're moving through the social classes in your life, you have social mobility. And so what they're saying is that they're saying it improves social mobility. So let's explore that real quick. What does that mean? Let's say that you had income redistribution, and because of that, that allowed a person enough money to buy a junker car, which means that they are able to travel to go to work, which means that they no longer have to rely on the bus system where there's limitations to where they can go work at, or maybe because they have kids, they just can't get up. Maybe it's 2 hours by bus to their job. And if they have kids, they just can't do that because they have to get up in the morning and they have to get the kids ready for school or get the kids off to daycare or whatever, right? In their morning, they just don't have the time. So what that means is that they're going to keep their radius close, meaning that they're going to have to work close within their area. But if you have somebody that's living below the poverty level, their area is economically depressed. Can we agree on that? Okay. Which means that if they're stuck to a radius because of a bus schedule or walking or having to ride a bike, they are only going to find jobs within that radius that are economically depressed, which means that typically they are going to be entry-level positions, manual labor positions that they're going to get in that is not going to pay them a lot of money, and or servers in restaurants. And I talked about on one of my shows the minimum wages for servers in various states. And I think it was Georgia is like $2.46 an hour if you don't tip, okay? So if you're waitressing at a Denny's because it's close to your house and you're serving clients who are in that area who are also economically depressed, and you're not making a good hourly wage, because in my example, I'm using a server, then the tips you're getting are not going to be really enough to close the gap and or pull you out of poverty. Do you guys follow the scenario I'm saying? Because when you talk about this stuff in context, you have to put it in context. You have to put it in the place where the people reside, where the people are. Okay? So in my example, if there was income redistribution of whatever kind, and it did allow somebody to buy a car, now their job opportunities have opened up. Now, maybe they can take their kids to a cheaper daycare, or maybe they can take their kids to daycare in general. Maybe they can get out of an entry-level position, and maybe they can commute, drive to different areas that are not economically depressed, and then maybe they waitress at a Denny's there. Okay, so in this example, they'd still be making the same hourly wage, but I think it would bear argument that they would be getting tipped more if they were out of that economically depressed area that they lived in. Are you guys following me? You feel what I'm saying, okay? So it's saying, hey, this gives more equal opportunities and this enhances social mobility, because if they can make more money, they can start pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and they can start moving through the social ladder, and they have more equal opportunities for employment because they are no longer restricted by travel in my example. Okay? So another pro argument for income redistribution would be it stimulates economic growth and consumer demand. Now, you see this all the time. During COVID, a lot of people banked their COVID money. They put it in savings account. And you might say, well, we didn't increase spending then. Well, we did. And I'm going to explain that here in a second. But for those of you who were around, I'm a Gen Xer, at one point, the second Bush, he gave us a $300 tax credit, and he was trying to stimulate the economy, and everybody over 18, he sent them a check for $300. And what we saw people with $300 going out and spending said $300 on stuff, maybe the shit that's in their Amazon cart that they never would, they kept waiting to buy. And then sure enough, boom, they were able to do it. Of course, Amazon really wasn't around then, but you understand what I'm saying. That would be a live example now. Or they went out to the brick and mortar stores at the time and they purchased stuff. So what happened is that spending generated the stimulus generated spending. And I've talked also about on my show how a typical dollar gets respent 7 times in the United States economy. Okay, but that's another topic. We're going to come back to that. Now, it also then would increase consumer demand, because if more people have money to buy more stuff, then more people work which means that they work hypothetically longer at the factories, assuming that they're from the United States and not from China. But even then, there's still stimulus, but we're not going to get into that because it's too deep. We're going to go off the tracks here. So the thing is that if you have people who are able to have more discretionary income, they will start buying stuff. So there was a Dave Chappelle episode where he was basically saying that, you know, in his episode, Black people got reparations, and it was extremely hilarious. And it was talking about how like KFC and FUBU merged and all this other kind of stuff. But if you watch the skit on YouTube, it's hilarious, but it literally illustrates the point that I'm trying to make to you when I'm talking about stimulating economic growth. And we're going to pick this back up on Friday, because right now I just want you guys to understand the pros and cons of the arguments. Another pro is that it promotes social cohesion and stability. So basically what it means is it means that people just get along better. Now, in Dave Chappelle's skit, he talked about, as he was doing the news reporting, he talked about the fact that crime has fallen to zero. And so when we're talking about social cohesion and we're talking about stability, we're talking about people. Now, there's always going to be criminals out there that are just assholes, okay? That are always doing shit just to be douchebags. But there's a lot of people out there who find themselves that they have to commit crimes in order to buy food, all right? Now, so assuming that those people didn't have to do that and they weren't douchebags by nature, the assumption would be that they would stop committing crimes. That's the assumption. Do I have research to back that up yet? No, I don't. Can I find it? Of course, and so can you. Google it, and you'll either find a pro argument for it or a pro argument against it. Just make sure you understand where you're getting your numbers, because I have resources, and if you want them, email me at mel@finances.com. So finances is plural, and I will be happy to show you all of my links and all of my research papers and everything I looked at, because I got a lot of fucking notes in front of me, you guys. I got 9 pages of notes. So if I'm telling you something, I've researched that shit. I'm not fucking around, all right? So, social cohesion and stability, right? That part just makes sense. So I'm going to catch up on chat, and I am going to play a quick song, and then we're going to come back with the cons of what income redistribution can look like. And so my show might go an hour. It might go a little over today. If you guys have to bounce at the hour mark, please listen to the replay, because there's some really good shit here at the end. Trash, what's going on? Trash asked a question. Are we talking about the government intentionally redistributing funds or the natural flow of wealth between different classes? We're talking about the government, but it's not in the way you think. It's not in the way you think, okay? So we're going to get to that as we move through. Analog is in here, and Sanguine, what's going on, babe? How are you doing? And of course, Jax at Outpost Gray, that's my girl. She will be coming on the show to talk about Chat GPT. And she will be talking about cybersecurity, because this is what she specializes in. And of course, I brag about her all the time, and I'm going to do it again. She has an act before Congress right now named after her called the Jax Act, JAX. Look that shit up. She's fucking amazing. But she will be on my show when our schedules link up to talk about ChatGPT, what it is, what it does, how it works, good things from it, bad things from it. And then I will be throwing in ideas how it can revolutionize multi-sectors when you're talking about investing, and what potential changes could be coming up. So I will have that in the description when it comes up, and you guys can check it out, because she really knows her shit. And I see the Rocks in here, even though she has not said anything yet. What's up? And then of course, we are talking about income redistribution. So today's show, I don't know how long it's going to go. Today's show is talking about what it is, pros and cons, and then there's a scenario that I just dreamed up to see if it would ever be feasible. And I sat here for probably 30 minutes yesterday trying to come up with reasonable numbers to see if income redistribution, if it ever got to a point, would ever be viable numbers wise. Okay. So now we talked about the pros of income redistribution, and we're not talking about how income flows through classes, we're talking about how the government would reallocate income. And then real quickly, Dream, he had mentioned in there, he said it's funny, it's odd to think that Medicare and Social Security are entitlement programs when we pay into them. Well, that's true. But remember that Social Security was part of the FDR's New Deal. Before that, nobody got shit. That was it, man. You just retired or died or got sick and your family took care of you, or you were destitute and homeless, and that was it. Now that you pay into the system, you are entitled to those payments, correct? However, if you didn't want to call it an entitlement system or an entitlement program, what you would have to do is you would have to put in the money and get exactly that same amount out. But that's not what happens. And I've talked about that. I've talked about what's happening with Social Security, that there's so many boomers hitting the Social Security system that the Xers, millennials, and Gen Z are going to get less from their Social Security than the boomers did, because the boomers have pulled out. So the silent generation put in more to Social Security than they ever got out. The boomers put in less to Social Security than they're getting out, because they're living longer, because they're healthier, because medical has advanced, and they're living longer, so they're taxing the system. So it's an entitlement program. If you're putting money into something and you're getting more out of it and you're entitled to receive that money, think of Social Security and Medicare in that standpoint. But when we talk about entitlement programs, don't get it twisted. Entitlement programs for budgeting purposes for the United States is Medicaid, which is welfare, Medicare, and Social Security. Those are all entitlement programs, period. Okay? They're all entitlement programs. If it makes you feel dirty, I'm sorry. It is what it is, right? Because again, before FDR, we didn't even have that. You guys see what I'm saying? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the cons and let's kind of explore this. Now, on Friday's episode, I will pick back up this topic and I will talk about different research where incentives have and stimulus has come into the economy, and the good and the bad and the ugly of it, assuming that this would ever become a thing, which, to be quite honest with you, I don't ever foresee it being called income redistribution, but you're going to find out in a minute that that's not what it actually is. So people say, of course, this would disincentivize productivity and entrepreneurship, because if people knew that the more money they made, the more wealth of theirs that they would have to redistribute out, then why would they want to work harder at their jobs? Or why would they want to get promotions? Or why would they want to get better cars? And oftentimes you look at a socialist society and you see this, where you see, hey, why would you be a doctor if you're going to be getting paid the same amount as somebody who flips burgers, right? So the thing is that if you look at it from that standpoint, yeah, I'm completely in line with that argument. Why would I become a doctor unless I just had a big love for being a doctor when I could flip burgers and make the same exact amount of money, or pretty damn close? There's no incentive there for me to do that, right? And we see this happening with our teachers right now. Okay, our teachers have, in every state, in every city, they have to fight for their raises. After COVID happened, I thought for sure people were going to give teachers raises. They didn't. And what we see now is we see more and more and more teachers leaving the profession to go do other stuff that they're happier. The tax reform, they took off a lot of their things that they could write off before. They took that away for teachers. And so we're seeing that the teaching pool is shrinking and shrinking when we already have overcrowded classrooms. This is kicking off more and more people to do homeschooling, which we haven't talked about that yet, but we will get there at some point about the numbers and economics behind homeschooling. And if everybody homeschooled, that would cut our property taxes. I'm just telling you. I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying think financially, you guys, because all this stuff could happen. All these trends that are happening, these are trends. They have ramifications. When COVID hit, we work from home. We start seeing that spread out through different sectors. We see it spread out through their bottom line, which affects your stock purchases, which affects your investments, which affects your life and your wallet. Okay? All right. So desensitizes productivity and entrepreneurship, because why would you start your own business if you're not going to really ever have a chance to be the next Elon Musk, right? I mean, it's a lot of fucking work. I know, and I know a lot of you guys on here have your own businesses. It's a lot of fucking work, and would be very desincentivizing for me to start my own business if I didn't ever think that at some point it was really going to pay off in a big way. Okay? Another argument against income redistribution, specifically from the government, is potential government inefficiencies and unintended consequences. Now, this is a solid argument. We know the government, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, is inefficient as fuck, right? So they're inefficient in their money. They're inefficient in the way everything is set up. And anytime there's a movement in the economy, they are steering a Titanic-sized iceberg. Okay, it's not like, why don't they just fix this? Well, because it's not just this one thing. It's layers and layers and layers and layers and old tax rules that contradict new tax rules. And then there's, different ways of thinking in Congress, which we've already talked about. But moving the United States economy or creating any real change financially is a ginormous task. And I think that when we get caught up in partisan politics, we forget that. We forget that you just don't, everybody's like, if I was president for a day, I'd fix everything. No, you wouldn't. Shut the fuck up. No, you wouldn't. Do you know how big the U.S. economy is? We are the biggest economy in the world. Okay, you're just not going to get in and fix shit. So, potential government inefficiencies, solid argument. Solid argument. So let's say that they did. But then, because of government inefficiencies, the money wasn't passed down correctly, or some people didn't get it, or there was loopholes, which the government is full of loopholes. And because of that, you have a misallocation of resources, and you have people have a greater dependency on government assistance. That's also a solid argument. That's also a solid argument, because we will have people in our society that just do not want to work. Now, I don't believe that everybody in welfare doesn't want to work. But I do believe that there's some people on welfare that do not want to work. Not everybody, but there are some. And I think we can agree on that, okay? And proponents against income redistribution say that it neglects addressing the root causes of inequality. So we've talked about redlining. I've talked about how credit card companies target Black and brown people. I just gave you an example in the pro part where I talked about a person being stuck in an economic area because they don't have a car. And so those are examples of inequality. And so basically what people who are arguing against income redistribution is saying, hey, look, you can't just throw money at it. You can't throw money at it because you're not going to, there's still going to be people out there who aren't going to hire Black and brown people. There's still going to be people out there who aren't hiring women or pregnant women or old people, like age discrimination, pregnancy discrimination, disabilities, like you can just add it on over and over. And that's a solid argument. That is a solid argument. And that by throwing money at it, by income redistribution, you are not improving the education system and creating jobs. Okay, so we've talked about the education system on my show extensively, like a couple weeks ago. We talked about the student loans. We talked about how much educational inflation has went up over generations between boomers and Xers and millennials, and how astronomically off the charts education has become and how expensive it has become. So that's also a valid point. But I'm going to take all of these arguments, and on Friday, I'm going to take the pros, and then I'm going to give you the cons to it. Then I'm going to take the cons and give you the pros to it. Okay? And then we're going to explore just some more numbers. All right? So they're basically saying you're just throwing money at the problem, but you're not fixing inequality. True. I mean, that's true, right? I mean, that is a legitimate argument. So balancing efficiency and equality. So they're basically saying that you need to be efficient while you are preserving the potential for individuals to be incentivized to be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's a cop-out. That's a cop-out to me. Balancing inefficiency and equality. Okay, but that's still not helping somebody who's living off $12,834 a year in the United States, right? That's not, I mean, you can address equality all you want to, but if the person does not have a car to get out of their 5-mile radius away from their house to potentially get into another area that's not as economically depressed, where they have better job opportunities, or in my first example, they can be a waitress or a waiter at Denny's, a server at Denny's, and they can still get tipped better, which will arguably lead to a better life for them. Okay? You see what I'm saying? So there's different things that you can do. People are saying you can do progressive taxation, which I'm going to talk about on Friday. You can do universal basic income. I'm going to talk about that on Friday. And you can do more social welfare programs. Now, as a moderate leaning left, when I hear somebody say we can do more social welfare programs, my ass clenches a little bit. I'm like, no, I think we're doing enough. I think we're inefficiency as fuck, but I don't necessarily know if we need more social welfare programs, okay? But they're saying, hey, look, for your knowledge, we could do these three things. And I'm going to pick this back up on Friday and go deeper into it. So, and I'm sorry, I was off by a couple dollars. So these are some statistics as of September 2021, which is the federal poverty guidelines for the lower 48 states. So I'm just going to run through these real quick, and then I'm going to play a song, and I'm going to come back. Actually, you know what? I'm going to play the song first. No, I'm going to do this now because we're going to get into heavy numbers. When I go through the numbers, I don't want you to focus on the numbers as much, because when you start saying millions, billions, trillions, what happens is that we lose billions and trillions in perspective. We lose them in the fold, and then you get very confused on what's happening with the numbers. So as I go through the numbers, I will tell you what's a deficit, what's an overage, and I will help you put the numbers in context. And then after I give you the scenario, I'm going to give you a summary of what I just told you so that you hear it all together and you don't get tripped up on the numbers. Because even myself, when you get into billions and trillions, it's very hard to calculate that. You're talking about a fuck ton of zeros, you guys. And I pride myself on being as meticulous on my examples and math as I possibly can. So based on information that came out of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in September of 2021 for the lower 48 states, for a single individual household, the poverty line was set at $12,880 annually in income, or $1,073 a month. So if you live by yourself, and there's only you in your house, and you make less than $12,880 a year, you are below poverty. For a two-person household, the poverty line was set at $17,420 annual income, or about $1,452 a month. For a three-person household, the poverty line was set at $21,960 or an annual income, or $1,830 per month. I need to drink some water here in a minute. And for a four-person household, the poverty line was set at $26,500 in annual income. So if you have a household with, two significant others in it with two children, that's a household of four people. So if they're making less than $2,000 or $26,500 annually, they are considered to be below the poverty line. Okay. I'm going to play, I want to play more Ozzy, but I'm going to play a quick Led Zeppelin song. It's actually not quick, but I need a break and I need to drink some water and breathe. So this is Babe, I'm Going to Leave You, which is one of my favorite Led Zeppelin songs. I'm going to catch up on chat. If you have questions, drop them and I'll address them when I come back. Ozzy, of course, you guys heard, he has come off of the big, massive tours that he was supposed to do. He was like, yeah, I'm ready to go back. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm not ready to go back. And I think that we need to just face the fact that Ozzy's never going to tour again. The man's 74, and if he lives to 80, I will be immensely shocked. But I absolutely love me some Ozzy. And I'm trying to see Rock Metal Nation is in the house. What's going on, babe? And so Trash is asking, what is Ampoween? I don't know what that is either. So we'll have to check it out. So I'm going to start wrapping up, but I still have probably another 20 minutes because I want to really dig into some numbers. Now, are you for income redistribution? Yes or no question. right? So you can put it in chat or you cannot put it in chat. I don't really care. But when I asked you that question, how did you feel? Were you like, hell no? Yes. Or, meh. I mean, you have a reaction to it. I mean, some of you might be meh, but most of you are going to have a gut reaction like, no, that sounds fucking horrible. Or yes, the 1% is hoarding too much money. It absolutely needs to be redistributed. And you're going to be on one side of the fence or the other. And I told you guys on Friday when I told you I was going to do this topic, and I think I told you at the top of the hour that I am not for income redistribution. However, my question would be, are you for higher taxes on the rich? Yeah. Yeah, I'm absolutely for higher taxes on the rich. I absolutely am. Okay, well then you're for income redistribution. So this is where the bad marketing comes in. I talked about at the top of the hour about the defunding the police movement, which has a horrible name. But when I did the 4-part series on finances, the other F word, and I actually dug into what they were saying, and I dug into the numbers and the police budgets and the city budgets and how much of it was being consumed on stuff that could be replaced with people who are more skilled, like mental health workers, to go out and help people who are mentally impaired or might be having a psychotic break. Then it started to make sense. And I'm like, yeah, there is definitely reform that's needed here. Defunding the police, horrible fucking name. Income redistribution, horrible fucking name. Okay? Higher taxes on the rich, all day long. All day long, right? So taxing the rich more is income redistribution. And the one thing I wanted to say real quick about, Jax had pointed out about homeschooling is not good for abusive households. And I completely agree with that, assuming that the parents would take the time to homeschool their kids if they really didn't give a crap about them, you know? So Dream Warrior about higher taxes, but they definitely need to close the loopholes. Well, we're going to get into it. I'm going to talk to you right now about higher taxes. So I'm going to be talking about millions. I'm going to be talking about billions. I'm going to be talking about trillions. All right. And I'm going to keep coming back to this because you're going to start getting, and you start getting confused by the trillion, billion, million, and it all just kind of coagulates in your brain like a big fucking mush ball. All right. So 1 million seconds ago was 12 days. So think of a vacation. So $1 million is like a vacation in seconds. All right. 1 billion seconds is 30 years ago. So that's a career. All right. That's your career. So $1 billion is like the equivalent of your career, a 30-year term. Okay. 1 trillion seconds is 30,000 years ago. So when we say the word $1 trillion, think of longer than human civilization has been around. Okay, so let me repeat that before I really start breaking down these numbers. 1 million seconds is like a vacation. It's 12 days. 1 billion seconds is like a career. It's 30 years. And 1 trillion seconds is longer than human civilization has been around, or the equivalent of 30,000 years. So get these numbers in context and start wrapping your brain around it. Now, let's get into some numbers. In the fiscal year of 2022, the federal government spent $1.19 trillion, or longer than human civilization has been around, $1.19 trillion on 80 different welfare programs. Okay, so at the time, that represented about 20% of the federal's budget, the U.S. federal's budget, okay, or to approximation of about $9,000 spent per American household over time. But focus on the $1.19 trillion. So that was spent on welfare. In Social Security, for the same time period in 2022, 21% of the budget, or $1.2 trillion, was spent on Social Security. Okay. Now I am going to, switch off of chat. I mean, chat is still going to go, but I'm going to move over to something because as chat's moving, it's throwing me off. And I really want to get into these numbers. So $1.19 trillion on welfare, or human civilization, and then $1.2 trillion on Social Security, slightly higher, okay, slightly higher, both of them considered entitlement programs. That's what they're called. Is it a misnomer? Yeah, but that's what it's called, right? So the total of both of those programs was approximated to be $2.39 trillion based on the fiscal year of 2022, or 2 human civilization lifetimes. Okay, so I was like, okay, what happens if we would just take, so if we have 12,000, what was the number I gave? Let me pull for my from my human services as far as the poverty levels they were talking about. So if you're a single individual household, if you were making less than $12,880 in annual income, you were considered below the poverty line based on numbers out of September 2021 from the Human Health and Services from the United States. Okay. So I thought, what would happen if we doubled that? Like, what would happen if we just said, hey, you know what? If you're over 18 years of age, you get $1,000 a month. That's it. You just get $1,000 a month. How would we do that? What would be the impact of that? Now, I'm not going to get into about semantics about that's too much or that's too little or it's unrealistic. Look, guys, it's an example that I created to figure out if this is even a viable solution. Now, do I ever think this would ever happen in the United States? Fuck no. Fuck no. I absolutely don't. However, you're going to find in a minute, we could do it. We could do it. So, those two programs for fiscal year 2022 was $2.39 trillion or 2 human civilization lifetimes, okay? So I said, all right, what would happen is if we gave everybody over 18, and this is based on a year, okay? So I didn't do projections over a person's lifetime. I can't do that kind of shit, but those are all factors you would have to consider to make this apples to apples comparison. Is like, well, if an 18-year-old, how long are they going to live? And because based on their race and their sex and their location, they're going to live longer. So then how much would that be over time? It's not adjusted for inflation. It doesn't take into account if the 18-year-old dies at 19. It doesn't take into account population growth. It doesn't take account people dying, off in populations. Just go with me. All right. But just understand, though, that when you keep everything in context, that's the shit you need to be looking at. And I have a lot of context in this motherfuckers. All right. So I was like, all right, let me just assume if we gave everybody $1,000, okay, for a month. And so it was estimated, and I'm going to pull up it was estimated that in the year of, I have the number, but I'm going to misquote it. So I'm trying to find in my notes exactly how much money or how many people it was. But it was estimated that, here we go, as of 2021, because we want to keep everything apples to apples, right? If I'm comparing the programs for 2021, then I need to give you population based on 2021 because that's just good research. So if you're reading research papers and they're not doing that, probably should not be reading those papers. So as of 2021, it was estimated at the time that 258 million people were over the age of 18. So assuming that in my example, we gave everyone $1,000 over 18 for a 12-year fiscal year calendar, that would cost $3.096 trillion or 3 human civilizations, okay? Now, that would be in addition, depending on how you look at it, to the $2.39 trillion that we are already spending, $1.2 trillion on Social Security and $1.19 trillion on welfare. So this would be assuming that we changed nothing and we just decided that we were going to give everybody $1,000 for a 12-month fiscal year a month if they are over the age of 18 in the United States, regardless of the situation. That would cost us an additional $3 trillion, which would double the lifetimes, the human civilization lifetimes that we're already paying. Okay? So, take that. Now, let's assume, so I did some research and my notes are all over the place now as I'm seeing it scattered. So give me a second as I scroll through my notes so I can put this in context that you guys can understand. So I was like, hey, how many households in the United States, based on 2021 numbers, keep it in context, were making over $500,000 a year? Okay, because $500,000 a year for a couple is over the amount of money that they can make to be considered an accredited investor. An accredited investor is somebody who makes a fuck ton of money, so they are perceived in the eyes of FINRA and the SEC to be smarter than the average investor and be more savvy, so they're considered an accredited investor, which means that they get access to investments that you don't. Okay? So I said, hey, how many people? So it was estimated 1.3 million households, or a career, 1.3 million households earned $500,000 or more a year. And I said, okay, what would happen? Because I've talked a lot on my show about the capital gains rate and how people who have wealth, they transfer money to generation after generation after generation, and they defer the taxes right along. And then if they do recognize any gain on the taxes, they are taxed at a more favorable tax rate than W-2 income earners. So the long-term capital gains rate is 20%. If you buy a stock at 10, it goes to 20, and you sell it, that $10 that you made is taxed at 20%. If you earn $10, depending on where you fall on the tax scale, you could pay 22% on that or 25% on that $10. So they're taxed at a favorable rate. So I was just like, let's just assume 30%. Let's just assume that they were paying 30%. What would that do? Okay, well, that would bring in an additional revenue. And now I'm assuming that 1.3 million households earn $500,000 a year. That's it. And they all pay 30%. Okay, so just across the board. And we're going to get to where these numbers start escalating here in a second. And that would bring in an additional $195 billion in tax revenue, or a career. 30 billion seconds is 30 years, which is the equivalent to a career. So it would bring in an additional $195 billion. Okay, so in this example, there's no way that we would be able, it wouldn't offset it. It's not going to offset being able to carry Social Security, being able to carry welfare, and being able to carry my hypothetical plan of paying everybody over 18 in the United States $1,000 a month, right, for a given 12-month cycle. All right? Now, let's assume, and then I'm going to have to play a quick song here in a minute because I'm starting to get out of breath and I need more water. Now let's assume that because we paid everybody $1,000 a month, we pulled people off of welfare. And let's assume that we cut welfare in half. Okay, so let's assume that because we're paying everybody $1,000 a month for people under $12,800 that are below the poverty level, we've just in essence doubled their income, which technically has brought them above the poverty line, which would mean technically by welfare standards that they no longer need welfare and or they need significantly less amounts of welfare. You guys feel me? Okay, so let's assume that Social Security stays the same, but half of welfare got cut. Okay. So Social Security is $1.2 trillion still. We haven't done anything with that. And we would have welfare be cut in half. So instead of $1.19 trillion, it would be $595 billion. So those two programs together would now equal $1.79 trillion. Okay. Not the $2.39 trillion that they originally equaled. It would equal 1.79 trillion because we have just given people $1,000 a month and we've taken them off welfare. However, we still have paid them $1,000 a month. So that means that we need to account for that $3.09 trillion in that extra program that I just told you about. Okay? Because you can't do it in a vacuum. Yes, you cut welfare by half, you keep Social Security the same. However, we're still paying people $1,000 a month and that costs money. Right? So again, you have to keep everything in context, minus the $195 billion in tax revenue that just came in, because every household, assuming all the 1% households were only making $500,000 and they all paid 30% tax bracket, which doesn't seem that unreasonable, that would mean that we would still have a deficit for my plan, my idea of $1.59 trillion. I'm going to play a song and I'm going to let you think about that. So this is what we just went through. I went through the numbers of what welfare is currently as far as 2021 and what Social Security is. Then I dreamed up a different program that pays everybody over the age of 18 in the United States $1,000 a month at a cost of an additional $3.09 trillion. Then I ran the assumption, assuming that because of this extra monthly payment, that at least half of welfare was cut. Okay, we're still running a pretty sizable deficit because the $195 billion in additional tax revenue we brought in this example is not enough to close the gap, even assuming that welfare is minimized by half. Okay, I'm going to play a quick song, take a breath, drink some water, and I'm going to come back and we're going to go farther down this rabbit hole. We are in the dead middle of running through a hypothetical scenario that I created of paying everybody that's over the age of 18 $1,000 a month for a 12-year period, and what that would do to the numbers and just different hypotheticals, okay? So if you got a bounce, listen to the replay because this is going to start picking up, and I'm trying to go slow because I want to keep the numbers in context, and I want to make sure that you guys are following with my train of thought. Also, if you haven't really listened to my show, context is extremely important when you're talking about numbers. Don't sit in front of somebody that does what I do for a living, who's a licensed certified financial planner, certified financial planners wouldn't do that. But, somebody who's in a position where they're giving you investment advice, if they're not giving you context on the numbers, because they will bull you. So please believe it. Hear me now and believe me later. So keep context in any research you're reading. Make sure you see where they're getting their numbers. Do their numbers make sense? And if people just focused on the numbers, a lot of the partisan bullshit would walk. It would walk. So I believe in numbers before I believe in politicians. So now let's assume that we also were able to cut Social Security in half, because the average American on Social Security, based on 2021 numbers, 2021 numbers, was making about $1,002, and I have it buried in my notes, but I just have numbers up my ass right now. So it's like $1,200 a month is the average that a recipient of Social Security would be getting on average based on 2021 numbers. So I said, okay, well, obviously, somebody on Social Security is over 18 years old, which would mean that in my example, they get $1,000 a month. Okay? So if they had a choice to take their normal Social Security or to, this would be the assumption. See, my context, I got confused. So this would be on top of their Social Security. But let's just assume that cuts Social Security in half as well. So you guys can follow the numbers. So in this example, we've cut welfare in half. We've cut Social Security in half, but we still have the cost of $3.09 trillion to do my program of paying everybody $1,000 a month and just income if you're over 18. Minus the tax revenue of $195 billion, that's the assumption that out of the 1.3 million households that were income earners of over $500,000, assuming that all of them only earned $500,000 a year and all of them paid a 30% tax rate, that would bring an additional $195 billion. So in this example, we have the $195 billion coming in, we have half of welfare being cut, and we have half of Social Security cut, so we have less spending, plus we have increased revenue coming in. We would still be short about $1 trillion. Okay? But in my example, I'm assuming that the 1.3 million households in America in 2021 that were considered that earned over $500,000 were only earning $500,000. But we know that there are households that are only earning around $500,000, but for the most part, money begets money. Okay, which means that they're making significantly higher than that. So let's assume, and this is where the numbers start getting really interesting. Let's assume that out of those $1.3 million households in the United States, 75% of them actually make $1 million a year. So I'm going to repeat this, and I'm repeating myself a lot because I need you to stay on track with me, okay? And you're going to get lost in my numbers, and I don't want you to do that. I want you to stay with me. So grab my hand. Let's go, okay? So in the previous examples, I took 1.3 million households at $500,000 each, paying a 30% tax rate to generate $195 billion. But we know that CEOs and entertainers and Congress, we know that they make easily over $1 million in book deals and all kinds of other shit. So I said, okay, what happens if out of those 1.3 million households, 75% of those households make over $1 million, or actually not over $1 million, just $1 million. And I'm going to put that number in context here in a minute. So in my assumption, 75% of the 1.3 million households are making $1 million a year, just a flat $1 million a year, and they're paying a 30% tax rate. That would increase tax revenue by $292.5 billion in revenue. So assuming 75% of the 1.3 million households make $1 million a year only, and they pay 30% tax bracket, that would increase our tax revenue into our United States budget for everyone by $292.5 billion. But that's still not enough to do all of those programs that I've been telling you about, keeping welfare, keeping Social Security, and keeping my newly invented program that's going to cost $3.096 trillion to give everybody $1,000 a month over the age of 18. So everything I just said, hold on. We're going to put all of that into context right the fuck meow, okay? Now, Gene Simmons is estimated to have earned for the fiscal year of 2022, I could not find a 2021 number, $34 million. If he paid 30% in taxes, he by himself for 1 year would generate $10.2 million a year. So assuming that 75% of the households in the $1.3 million households, the 1.3 million households that are considered to be in the 1% in the United States, assuming that they were all Gene Simmonses, which they're not, and I know that, but I'm trying to put this in context so you understand, right? So no, not all of them are making $34 million by a long shot, but we know Gene Simmons. We're metal lovers, we're rock lovers, and even if you're not, you know Gene Simmons. So if he paid 30%, which he does not, he fucking does not. Please believe this motherfucker does not pay 30% in taxes overall. He would generate $10.2 million a year by himself. So if we assumed that 75% of the 1.3 million 1% households in the United States were Gene Simmons and earning $34 million a year and paid 30% taxes, that would equal $9,945 billion in additional tax revenue, which would close the deficit and give us a surplus to cover all three programs. Now, it is arguably a lot of factors. Not every household makes $34 million. You're running under the assumption that Social Security would stay the same. You're running under the assumption that inflation stays the same. You're running under the assumption that welfare doesn't get modified. You're running under the assumption there's no population growth. There's nobody dying out. There's nobody growing population-wise. Okay, and you're taking it a lot of factors that are hidden in these numbers, like gross domestic product, meaning that everybody who is working now, just because they get an additional $1,000 a month, does not mean that they stop working. They just continue to work, but they're making $1,000 more a month based on this hypothetical program that I just made up. So we're at a surplus Okay. But I'm going to say this and put it in context. Then I'm going to play a song, and then I'm going to come back and tell you everything I just told you in a stream of consciousness so you're able to follow me. But let's assume, okay, to put Gene Simmons in context, Elon Musk was estimated that he earned for the fiscal year of 2022, because I'm comparing Gene Simmons and Elon Musk, so we're keeping those numbers the same, $100 billion. If Elon Musk was taxed at 30%, he would generate by himself per year, in my example, $30 billion in tax revenue, or 30 careers. Do you understand what the fuck I am trying to tell to you, okay? When I gave you the example of $500,000 households, that's a lot of money, but at the same time, I don't know if somebody making $500,000 a year would be considered ultra rich. And we saw that when we did that, it didn't really move the needle, but it did add $195 billion to our United States budget in my fictional example that could fund programs you love. And then when I started moving up the needle, where I said, okay, let's assume they make $1 million, 75% of them make $1 million. How much would that generate? And the other $500,000 earners are still paying into taxes too, but we just focused on the 75%, assuming of those 1.3 million households, assuming that they were making $1 million and taxed at 30%. We saw it brought in $292.5 billion, or 292.5 careers into the system. Then we used Gene Simmons as an example, and then we just used Elon Musk, who would by himself generate $30 billion a year in tax revenue. So sit with that number for a second. I'm going to play another Ozzy song, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to run through everything I just told you so that you can understand that it is possible. Is it plausible? There's a lot of arguments for and against, but I just wanted to say, take all that bullshit out. Let's look at the numbers. Take the fucking Republicans, take the Democrats out of it. Let's look at the numbers. Could we do it? We absolutely fucking could. You guys, we absolutely fucking could if we decided to. So here's an Ozzy song, and then I'm going to come back and summarize this and then wrap this up and get me some fucking caffeine. So when I come back Friday, we're going to pick up the pros and con arguments. We're going to do a hypothetical move through the system of all of the goods and bad things that could happen within our financial economy, assuming under my hypothetical example that we were giving everybody $1,000 a month if they were over 18 in the United States. And we're going to start looking at some numbers of global poverty so that you guys can understand and keep it in context how rich the United States is. Okay, we're talking about the 99% versus the 1% right now, but we are the 1% globally. You and I and everybody listening to the show. And I'm going to ask you guys real quick to do me a favor. And I never do this, and I should be better at self-promotion. I put a lot of work into the show. Please tell people about this show. I have a time slot that not a lot of people are up, or they don't listen to the show. And because of that, my growth has been slow. And that's fine, because I need my time slot, because I work in an industry that needs to be trading when the market's open. But please share the show, talk about it on your show. Please let people know, because I do a fuck ton of work, you guys, and I would really appreciate the love. So enough of that. So let me just explain to you what I just told you, and I'm going to move through this more quickly, but I want to reinstill this in you because I just threw a fuck ton of numbers at you over the last, 10 or 15 minutes. And if you need to listen to it on the replay, please do, because this was the meat and potatoes of everything I was putting together yesterday, because you can't argue numbers. The numbers don't care how you feel. They're numbers. Numbers are numbers. It doesn't matter what the fuck you think. So numbers wise, we could do it. We could do it. And so let me tell you what I just told you. Fiscal year ending in 2021, welfare cost us $1.19 trillion, or one human civilization. If you were listening a couple 20 minutes ago when I explained to you the difference between million, billion, and trillion, okay? Social Security cost us $1.2 trillion. So the total for both of those programs was $2.39 trillion. And in my example, if we assume that we gave everyone $1,000 a month over the age of 18 in the United States, based on the numbers from 2021 of 258 million people being over 18, my fictitious program would cost the United States government an additional $3.096 trillion. And so all of those together, welfare, Social Security, plus my fictitious program would cost, in this example, the United States government $5.486 trillion. We are assuming, based on the numbers in 2021, that 1.3 million households in America are, well, we're not assuming, that's the number. So 1.3 million households in America at the time of 2021 were earning $500,000 a year or greater. Okay, so if we assumed that all of those households were only making $500,000 a year and we taxed them at 30%, that would generate an additional $195 billion in tax revenue. But that is still not going to fund all three of the programs. So if we assumed that, I'm sorry, I'm like trying to breathe here. If we assume that we were able to cut welfare by half, we would still have a deficit of about $1 trillion. All right. Now, let's assume that out of those 1.3 million households, 75% of those households make $1 million a year. Okay, just $1 million a year, just a flat $1 million a year, 75% of them, and the other 25% make $500,000, and they're still paying taxes too, but we're not taking them into consideration. I'm focusing on households, 75% of 1.3 million households making $1 million a year, taxed at 30%. That would bring an additional $292.5 billion in revenue. However, we know in America, people make way more than that. So I use the example of Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons is estimated to have made $34 million last year alone in 2023, assuming he paid 30% tax rate, which he did not and probably never has for at least since the late 70s. He would have generated by himself $10.2 million a year in taxes, or 10 vacations, for those of you who are following the context of the numbers. So he, by himself, for that 1 year, would have generated $10.2 million, which still makes us, by himself, not reach our goal. However, if we assumed that 75% of the households were Gene Simmons's and did make at least $34 million a year, and they were taxed at 30%, that would add an additional $9.955 billion into tax revenue. And I just told you at the top of the hour that if you took my fictitious program of $1,000 a year at $3.096 trillion, plus the $1.19 trillion in welfare, plus the $1.2 trillion we spend on Social Security, that would still net us a surplus of $4.459 billion. That was a lot. So I will come back on Friday, and I will be talking more about what the actual game plan would look like for income redistribution if we decided that it was even a viable thing to do. And the numbers that I provided you, they are not without fault. Okay? There's a lot of things I could not take into account. There's a lot of moving targets that I could not hit. So can you argue me on my numbers? You can. You absolutely can. But it's possible if we tax more of the rich people. Now, Dream brought up a very, very good point. He said the ultra-rich would just leave the country. Well, yes, that's true, but let's dissect that for just 1 second as I wrap up. So what? So what? So a lot of the ultra-rich don't even have companies based in the United States because of our taxes, and our taxes are considerably low now. So it's easy for you to say, well, the ultra-rich would just leave and then we wouldn't have any tax revenue at all. Okay, but then what you'd have to do, flip side, keep it in context, how many of those ultra-rich are really actually paying the taxes here? Or they're not paying in tax-sheltered accounts in other parts around the globe, or they don't have companies that are actually headquartered out of different parts of the globe to take advantage of better tax rates. And we know that when countries try to get cash in, they give incentives. They give tax incentives. So people who are ultra rich, they have mobility, they have choices. So they can go establish new companies to help other companies, to help protect other companies, to funnel money through, to make it less taxable. So who fucking cares at the ultra rich left? You can't take that in context without taking it into, but what are they actually paying now? And since we know that most of the ultra rich are not getting income and are not having to dig into their assets, which means that virtually they're paying nothing in taxes because they have no ordinary income coming in, and they're not paying capital gains because they're deferring it generation after generation with different tax sheltered vehicles. Even if half of them stayed and had to pay 30%, I still have a solid argument. You guys feel what I'm saying? So, let's see. So, that's it. I'm fucking exhausted. I'm going to get some caffeine. I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for hanging out with me. I will see you back again Friday morning where I dissect the other half of this topic. And we talk about more on a global scale about who the 1% really is, and it's Americans, and what would global redistribution look like. And of course, I don't like that income redistribution for Americans, but I do like higher taxes on the rich. But I really don't like global redistribution of my wealth as an American to other countries. And I know that makes me sound like an awful person, but I'm being real. I'm being real with you guys, right? But who knows? On Friday, when I research it, maybe I'll change my mind. So please talk to people about the show because my time slot is a little weird, or encourage them to listen to the replays or something because this is good information. I appreciate all of you guys for hanging out with me for an hour and a half while I fucking pelted you with fucking numbers. And we talked about income redistribution. And I hope that out of my show, you get different perspectives on things that you thought that you had a solid line on, because I solidly came into this saying absolutely not. Income redistribution's bullshit. I'm not giving my money to people who don't, quote, deserve it. Then when I researched it, I was like, oh shit. Okay. Yeah, I guess that does kind of make a little bit of sense. Now, that is what you will get in my show. And I'm going to stop. I was going to keep talking. I'm tired, and I'm sure you guys are too. Thank you for listening to me ramble on at the end here. Amp, I am out this bitch, and I will see you Friday back at 6 a.m. Pacific time. Have a great time. Please share my show. Tell people about my show. Listen to the replay. There's a lot of information. Peace.
Thanks for listening. If you like us, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.